It's time.
10 years ago, would you have imagined that K-pop demon hunters would be a thing and that they would be recognized at the Oscars in Hollywood? Would you have thought that a Labubu, a furry character from Asia, would rock up at the iconic Macy's Day Parade in New York? Probably not, right? In a hyper-connected world, Asian culture is booming, and today's guest thinks it's just the beginning. Hi, it's Tank Talks Asia. I'm Manisha Tank at Asia Work Studio in Singapore. From me and the rest of the team, a very warm welcome. On this show, we're plunging into the fascinating realm of Asian consumer culture. Andrea Ng is a myth-busting historian who spends her time helping brands understand the truth about Asian culture. She's the Insights Director at market research firm Canvas 8. Andrea, it's so good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
I think it's a bit strange for you, isn't it, to be on the opposite side of the table? Because normally you're the one going around asking questions, right?
Yeah. So it's a little bit strange to be on the side. It was a good experience as well to see what, usually my interviewees would experience. And I've been doing and going around Asia, interviewing people for more than a decade now. And basically, as a qualitative practitioner, my job is to go down to the grounds, having a focus groups or doing ethnographies to kind of really understand what people are doing in their lives, what they're looking at, what they really want, so they can bring that information back to our clients and to the brands that we are working with to help them understand what products to make, what campaigns to create, and what kind of marketing campaigns to really resonate with the people out there. I have a background in cultural history. Actually, even in university, I was trained to do history and kind of use that experience and that knowledge to kind of segue into understanding societies and kind of bring in a lot of cultural knowledge and cultural understanding of the region. After all, Asia is so huge and so big, and there's a lot of mysteries around it as well. And I'm still learning every day, every job, every project that I take. So I'm looking forward to see what else I can unravel of this region. And bring that back into what I do on the day-to-day as well, is that we work with brands and businesses to help them understand people, essentially.
All right, well, let's get into it.
Yeah.
We're going to do some myth-busting today. I love a bit of myth-busting. And let's start with the big picture stuff. Everyone always says that this is going to be Asia's century. Is that necessarily true when you look at it from a cultural point of view?
Well, this term Asian century, I've been hearing it since way back when I was a student in university. And I think they've been throwing this around, whether it's Asian century or Chinese century, whatever term you call it. I think it's been further popularized as well on platforms like the World Economic Forum. So when you think about Asian century, it always comes in from a geopolitical lens and very much about economic dominance, rising income, so on and so forth. But very rarely do we actually look at that from a consumer culture lens as well. There is this veteran diplomat in Singapore where he was talking about how the Asian century is a myth. And rightfully so as well. The region is so complex. It's so hard to compress that into a single narrative. But if I kind of take a step out and look at what we do, from a consumer culture perspective, I can almost say that maybe the Asian century is almost here, actually. Well, you think about this. Who is the world looking towards when it comes to what to buy, what to eat, where to go, what to consume, what to watch, so on and so forth?
You're saying people are looking east to understand that?
You're starting to see that coming over to the Asia side. One of the things that we've seen as well is the rise in global soft power from Asia as well. You think about Korean films, winning a lot of prestigious international awards. You think about Korean beauty, Chinese beauty, making headways in the US markets, for example, really fundamentally changing the beauty industry, essentially. You think about toys like Labubu, blind boxes as well. All these are making headways globally, and they're all originated from Asia.
I'm not going to reveal how old I am, but I do remember watching, Bruce Lee movies when I was growing up. So it's not that Asian stars, for example, haven't been seen by the rest of the world. They have. But there's obviously been an acceleration in recent years. So what's driving that?
The scale of it is driven by digitization as well. And the fact that social media is driving us a lot more connected globally. And think about Hello Kitty versus Labubu, for example. The reason why Labubu can actually scale so rapidly and so quickly is also very much driven by the fact that we are so much more interconnected today with social media.
And Rihanna having a Labubu.
Exactly. And the fact that it started out in Hong Kong, it's made in China, it's ignited by Lisa, who's a Thai celebrity, who's actually a K-pop star. And then it goes all the way to the US, where I don't know if you've seen last year at the Macy's Thanksgiving Parade, they actually have a Labubu float.
Right.
And right now, Sony Pictures are in the talks of creating a Labubu movie. So you start seeing all these connections coming together and converging together, very much also driven by the fact that the digital network and infrastructure has created an environment that allows us to scale at speed and at scale.
All right, let's get on to myth number 2. Is there such a thing as an Asian consumer? And, you know, who is that person?
I think the Asian consumer is a very misleading concept in marketing. And I like to think of it as the way we look at generations, you know, generational alpha, Gen Zs, and millennials. I don't know how much you identify with any of these labels at all. But
I don't even understand half of them, let's be honest. But anyway, go on.
But all these labels exist for a reason. And they help us understand very complex situations or complex groups of people into something that's more manageable as well. But to really understand whether there's an Asian consumer or not is to really understand the textures behind it. And the reality is this, like we've been talking about right from the start, that Asia is so complex. There's 4.8 billion people. There's so many different languages as well. There's varying progress and growth as well from different markets. So to say that there is one singular Asia is very challenging. And I think one of the things that we also need to look at, something that we often tell businesses and brands as well, is we do want to look for affinities. We do want to look for synergies and cultural synergies across the markets. But what's really different and what's really meaningful is when you start looking at a local level and you start understanding people at an individual and a human level as well. Because every market is different. So maybe let me give you an example. Let's look at demographics. Okay, let's look at demographics. Let's look at Japan and South Korea. They are now tackling one of the world's biggest challenge, which is rapidly aging population. Alongside that is also a rise in what we call the solo economy. So single households are going to be rising. I think in South Korea, they're going to expect it to be about 44% of all households by 2035. That's quite significant. That is going to be a society and individuals that are going to be optimizing for something very different. They're going to be optimizing for longevity. They're going to be optimizing and deciding what to consume to help enrich their single life, single experience. It's going to be a very different experience there compared to if you look at markets like India or Indonesia, for example, where you are very much powered by a very tech-native youth bulge that's full of energy, that's really looking to the future as well.
Yeah.
And they're going to be optimized for a very different reason. They're going to be looking for access. They're going to be looking for status. And if you think about access as well, they're going to have a lot more accessibility than the previous generations ever did as well.
Yeah, I found that really intriguing how McDonald's has been tackling that.
Yeah. So McDonald's partnered with a brand called Carrot, and it's a local second-hand marketplace app, and created this, I believe it's called French fry gatherings or something like this, where you kind of invite 50 people and you just have limitless fries and you just gather and kind of connect with each other as well. And you also start seeing things like running clubs in South Korea booming. And there's a really interesting dynamic here. I think one of the sociology professor in South Korea talked about how in South Korea, there's a lot of societal pressures with hierarchy as well. There's a lot of unspoken social mannerisms that you kind of have to be mindful of, and it creates a lot of social pressure. And this is also a reason why people potentially are retreating as well, because there's just so much additional pressure or friction there. So running clubs and all these different little gatherings that brands are doing are trying to create informal networks and spaces that's really light touch so that people can come out of their shell, connect, and then go back to wherever they are, essentially. So I think there is a really different dynamic there in South Korea compared to, say, in more communal spaces and communal societies like Indonesia, for example.
All right, let's talk about consumption behavior. Is there going to be this booming middle class that everyone is talking about? And frankly, a lot of brands seem to be banking on.
Well, I think aspiration is universal, right? And what is different here is the how aspiration is expressed as well. And one very careful thing that we have to be mindful of in Asia is that aspiration is not uniform. It's not uniform across the markets. And we start seeing this slightly differently. A lot of the young consumers there, their aspirations will be very much vertical, which means they're going to kind of look for signs of progress. They're going to consume things that help mark their signal and their arrival as well. Versus in places like, I would say, Singapore, even South Korea, for example, where it's really a little bit more developed as well, aspirations may not necessarily just be vertical, it could go sideways as well. And you start seeing things like pop-up experiential events, all these different experiences. It's going to signal taste. It's going to signal different expansion of experiences as well, which is also part of aspiration. Then you're going to look at markets like China, for example. You start breaking it down by the generations. You're going to have different layers of expressions of aspirations. You're going to have a generation where it's still all about the logos and the flashy icons.
I was dying to ask you about that. Just explain that whole dynamic to me for a second.
I think when we look at flashiness of logos, we were talking about a generation, and especially in China, for example, that's quite above us, above the millennial generation, for example. It's a time that coincides with the ascent of China. At a time where China was opening up, there was kind of that growing middle class that we've been talking about as well. And therefore, the way to signal arrival is to buy into logos, is to buy into flashy brands as well, to signal that you are here, you are there. But what we're also seeing, quite interestingly, with the younger cohorts right now in China, is that they're moving towards the global movement of quiet luxury. Or actually, they're kind of looking for other ways of expressions of aspirations as well.
Like what? Like what's quiet luxury?
So it could be things like buying into a local brand, for example. So instead of buying a Louis Vuitton, you might be picking up a Songmont, for example. And local brands, in terms of the ideas and the values of craftsmanship, for example, heritage storytelling, all these little new values of what makes a brand is going to be really important to some of these younger consumers as well. Very much on the same time is also because they don't necessarily have sufficient disposable income as well to be spending at that level. So we're going to have to see that some of these consumption behaviors and values going to have to recalibrate and evolve because of the unemployment, the uncertainty of the economic world, so on and so forth.
Does everyone really love a bargain? Okay, Andrea, I'm really excited to talk about myth number 4. Is it true that Asian consumers always want a bargain?
Don't we all love a bargain, right? We all do. We all love a good deal. But I think the other way to kind of look at this as well is that to chase a good deal is also for someone to say you're looking for price, that Asian consumers are very price driven. Now, that's too simplistic a way to kind of say it. And actually what we're seeing here is Asian consumers are so savvy that it's actually all about the value proposition. It's not about the bargain. It's not about the discount. It is about the value proposition that they get.
Okay, wait. Explain, because value proposition. These are just words, but what do you really mean?
I was just about to get to that, actually. So values are really important when it comes to what consumers consider is a good deal. Now, there comes in many different dimensions, and let me kind of break it down for you as well. So I was just recently in Shanghai, actually, and I was just doing some field work, and I was just on the streets, kind of looking at what's changing in the city, and I came across a really interesting phenomenon, and I noticed that a lot of the consumers there are aggressively trading down on certain categories that they're buying, and actually trading up or buying up or paying more for other categories as well. And that's a really interesting behavior that we're seeing in China right now. And actually not just in China, I would say across Southeast Asia. A lot of this is driven by the economic pressures, right? Okay. Uncertainty of the economic world, what's going to happen. It doesn't necessarily mean that when the economy is bad that people stop spending. They're just reorganizing and redirecting their spending.
So what is it that they're trading up and what is it that they're trading down?
That's a really good question. So what they are doing, actually, it really depends on the individual. What that value comes from is what that value means to the individual as well. So say, for example, I value luxury products. So then I might trade down on my essentials, for example, to make sure that I have sufficient funds to then spend on the things that I enjoy in. So when I talk about value, what we are also seeing emerging is that value is being placed on the softer metrics, on softer things like emotional value, softer things like social utility, for example, what kind of joy it brings to you as well. And there's a reason why blind box is trending as well, because it just brings so much comfort and joy in the time, and people are willing to spend on those little comforts of joy. So it really depends on what the individual's value proposition is and what matters to that individual. So we're saying that they are kind of recalibrating their funds to do that. And it's a really intelligent way of doing that. Another way of kind of looking at a good deal or even just looking at value is the double-digit events. I don't know if you joined the whole Shopee, Lazada, 99 events.
Yeah, 9911.
Yeah. Almost every month now there is something, right? But there's a really interesting phenomenon happening. Shopee last year, when they did a 99 event, I can't believe this, but they made 18 billion baht sales for that year. And they made 1 billion baht of sales in 18 minutes. That
Good
was how
Lord.
quick it was. It's mind-blowing.
I've heard that people actually line up their shopping basket just before midnight.
Yes.
And then they hit the button
Yes.
and off they go.
Now, if you kind of read that behavior on its own, you can just simply say, okay, these consumers, they are just discount hunting. They're just looking for the cheapest price and therefore they're doing that. But if you kind of understand the behavior slightly behind it, is that these are consumers who are so savvy enough that they are budgeting, they are managing their budgets across the year, across the months as well, kind of trading up, trading down, making sure that they're getting the best deal before they buy it on the Shopee deal itself. Now, the other thing that Shopee did really well in those events as well is that it's no longer just about spending or buying. It turns spending into a celebration. It's a ritual. Every time a double-digit year month comes along, it's a ritual. You cannot do it for fun. And we see that a lot of people are participating in it. And it's giving rise to this phenomenon called shoppertainment.
Coming up, Asia loves convenience. True or false? Let's jump on to myth number 5, and we still have a bunch to get through. Convenience. So this is all about the idea of convenience. What does it really mean to Asian consumers? And is it the driver of Asian consumer behavior?
Let me break it down in 3 spaces for you, three parts here. And this is where I get really nerdy and excited about the history part.
Go for it.
So I think we cannot talk about convenience if we don't look at convenience stores. Right? We have to look at the physical manifestation of convenience. Which is
So like your
convenience
7-Elevens.
7-Elevens, exactly. Let me bring it to Japan. When Japan brought in 7-Eleven from the States, I think, you may correct my history, my dates here, I think around the 1970s, it was a very different infrastructure. Japan at the time was growing. There was a very new dynamic when it comes to work and life. And so the society was still kind of finding itself. And if you think about convenience stores in the States, for example, it's like a pit stop, right? You need something, you drive there, you pick it up, and then you go, it's done. Very linear, very simple. But when 7-Eleven was imported into Japan, it kind of took on a social meaning behind it as well. It became an infrastructure where you can pay your bills there, you can get a hot meal there, you can get printing done there, you can print old newspapers there as well. You can do a lot of things in there, and became an infrastructure to support the changing society that we're seeing in Japan. What's really interesting as well is several years ago, I was in Indonesia doing field work, doing some ethnography, and I was on the streets and I noticed that a lot of the urban youths were actually flocking to 7-Eleven and hanging out there.
Oh, really?
And it became a cool thing for young Jakartans to be hanging out at 7-Eleven. Of course, 7-Eleven has closed down now, but at the time, it was really interesting because I saw the parallels between Japan of the time when it was developing and Indonesia now when it's developing as well. It's that 7-Eleven became this living room that's air-conditioned in the city for people to come in together. A third space, essentially, where Starbucks was too expensive, but 7-Eleven, you've got snacks ready there, you've got a lounge there that you can sit there, and convenience stores took on a slightly different meaning as well. So it's not convenience for convenience sake, but it's also convenience in the fact that it has turned into a sense of belonging. So that's a physical manifestation of how it kind of creates cultural meaning.
It's quite intriguing because recently I was with a family member traveling in Europe, and this family member had recently been to Japan. We saw a 7-Eleven and the family member said, "Oh, I really want to check out this 7-Eleven because I want to see if it's like the ones in Japan."
Yes.
I think that's really fascinating. Later in the show, anyone for a Labubu? Do you think that we can jump onto myth number 6?
Well, let me add one more point to myth number 5 then.
Right, go for it.
It is, you can't talk about convenience without talking about super apps.
Yes. This is true.
Yeah, we have to talk about super apps because super apps is so ingrained in our way of life here in Asia that it's now in the West. I know they're trying very hard to kind of identify what that could be.
So you're talking about sort of the WeChats, the Grabs, this kind of thing.
The Gojeks and everything. And what's really interesting is, I touch on Gojek, is that they didn't invent convenience in any way. They kind of took what was already there. Ojek was already in the Jakartan streets, and there was already an informal network of convenience there. I kind of scaled it. And I kind of put it together all in one app and scaled it so that everybody has convenience readily on an app itself. So you can't talk about convenience without super apps. So that's definitely going to be a really important point here.
Let's park that. We've got to go on to myth number 6. Asian consumers and whether or not they actually follow global trends? This is a really interesting one. So who's driving the cultural agenda?
It's already there. You think about BTS dominating the charts as well. You think about Korean food. Like, I think there was a Korean instant noodle brand that kind of grew over like 200% over a couple of years as well, just because the interest in Korean food just blew up because of Netflix, essentially, with all the street food documentaries and whatnot. So there's definitely a lot of trends and movements that we're seeing happening in Asia that's actually now trending in the global West, essentially, as well. So I would say definitely the directions and the tides have changed a little bit. I'm really excited personally to see Southeast Asian trends really pick up on a global scale, like Thailand tea wave. Thailand wave is growing and it's really big in Southeast Asia right now. So I'm really excited to see that actually growing and booming across into the Western markets.
Yeah. Bubble tea.
Yes.
Bubble tea. Such a good example of a sort of an Asian product that's gone global.
Yeah.
Amazing. All right. Myth number 7. Asian consumers are passive followers of authority and brand heritage. Oh, this feels so wrong to even say it. But anyway, go for it.
Well, this was a really interesting question that I was discussing with my team as well. And one of our analysts, Ali, kind of mentioned that we need to talk about this. It's important. And it's also very much because the idea of the differential Asian consumer, essentially loyal to those big brands, swayed by celebrities and whatnot, it's actually one of the most commercially costly errors or mistakes or myths out there. What we have is the opposite. A lot of Asian consumers are what we call co-creators of brands as well. They're very vocal about what they want to see from brands and businesses and what they consume, essentially. We talk about how earlier Asian consumers are one of the most savviest ones out there. They have a lot of networks and communities set up to study the brand, to kind of discuss and interrogate the brand itself. You've seen, like in Indonesia, for example, they're very quick to boycott a brand based on geopolitical reasons or ethical reasons as well. So there are actually a lot of Asian consumers or consumers in Asia who are actually really vocal about what they're consuming and what kind of brands they are buying into as well.
There is no one Asian consumer because there's so many markets, different languages, different cultures.
Yeah, I think in some ways there are definitely affinities across the markets. If it's Singapore and Malaysia, Singapore and Thailand, or wherever not, there are certain behaviors, certain interests, or certain tastes and aspirations that is quite common, and there's affinities around there. But there are also the differences as well. I think one of the big challenges that Asia is going to have to see is, while community is growing and you start seeing running clubs, high rock clubs, and all these things booming and growing and kind of going, cross borders as well, you're going to also have to start seeing a lot of isolation as well, a lot of loneliness issues that we talked about earlier as well. That is going to be like this twin engine that we're going to have to try and navigate. What does that mean? So like we talked about McDonald's, for example, trying to resolve that on a brand level as well. We've seen how Heineken, for example, created social rooftops, social spaces as well to bring people out of their shell. So we're going to start having to see how brands are going to help tackle some of these demographics challenges. But at the same time, we're kind of leaning on some of the regional knowledge and regional growth as well to understand how can we actually grow our societies in each different markets.
Okay. For everyone who can't see it, we have a rather intriguing looking box on the table. We ask our guests to bring a memento for the Tank Talks Asia shelves. Tell us a little bit about what I can only see as a white box that has a bit of writing on it. I'm intrigued. What have you brought for us?
Well, I brought you a Labubu.
Oh, of course.
Of course. I mean, we started out talking about Labubu. We have to end a conversation with Labubu as well.
So I get to turn this over and see what we've got here.
This is a blind box, and hopefully it brings you as much joy as it should. And I think the phenomena of Labubu just taking off is just such a quintessential example of just the soft power that we've been talking about in Asia and just how things are just going viral from the markets here.
I feel like I have to just rip it open.
Go ahead.
I'm going to rip this open, and I hope that, all of our listeners can hear me opening this box up. I've never opened one of these blind boxes before.
Yeah.
Oh, here we go.
Yes.
Shall we open this up and see? So it's in this lovely packaging. Big into energy, it says on the front, with all these pictures of Labubus.
Now I wonder what you got.
Yes.
Oh.
Isn't that cute?
Yeah, that's
Isn't
really
that
cute.
I got a lovely, rather fierce-looking Labubu in a lovely teal turquoise colour.
I wonder which one you got. It's
I'm not
Serenity.
Serenity?
Yeah.
That sounds right up my street. I'm going to go and be a bit serene now that we've had this very exciting conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Andrea, it was great to see you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
It was so clear to me that Andrea absolutely loves what she does, and I think you could tell as well. Thanks from all of us at the AsiaWorks team for making it to the end of this episode. There's plenty more in our show notes, so have a look in case there's something there you'd like to follow up on. And maybe like and subscribe to Tank Talks Asia. That way you'll never miss an episode. I'm Manisha Tank. Bye for now. Tank Talks Asia is an AsiaWorks production, and the views and opinions shared by our guests are their own.